Hello, and welcome to The Public Square, a show that explores public affairs and religious liberty issues that affect our nation and beyond. I'm your host, Paul Goodridge, and I serve as the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for the South Central Conference of Seventh day Adventists. Each show will talk to individuals who are on the front lines of the fight for civil and religious liberty. My goal is to inform about issues that directly and indirectly have an impact on everyday life, ignite meaningful thought and reflection, integrate faith principles in how we relate to others, and inspire people to action. So, thanks for joining us, and let's meet in the public square. My guest today is Kimberly Williams. She's the partnership specialist from the United States Census Bureau for the Madison, Morgan, Lawrence, Limestone, and Winston County areas here in Alabama. She has varied background with experience in criminal justice, social services, and the law. Kimberly, welcome to the Public Square, and thank you for joining me.
And thank you for having me. I look forward to our conversation on today, discussing all things census and why it is important that we all get involved and participate.
Okay, great. Well, let's just jump in. So, what is the census?
Okay, the census is a count of every individual in the United States of America. And so the census started back in 1790. Mm-hmm. And back during that time period, there was no, where it is today, there was no individual mailing, if you will, of households and finding out who lived in the households. It was more so the general going around and taking an account of each individual in the United States.
Okay.
And so, yes, it dates back to 1790, and it's done every 10 years. That's why it's called the decennial census. We do have other censuses that take place yearly, like our economic surveys and things of that such. But this particular census gets a count of every individual who is on United States soil.
Okay. And so you said it started in 1790. 1790. Okay. And so has it been done the same way? Because I know now you can do it. There's the option of doing it online. When did that start?
Okay, so like I was explaining before, they used to go around and actually get a count. The general will go around and get a count of individuals. Now, the decennial census is different than it has been ever. So in previous census, in previous decennial census, 2010, 2000, 1990, what have you, you would get a questionnaire in the mail. And you would complete your census questionnaire and you would mail it back. For the first time ever, in 2020, we all had the option of filling and completing our census online.
Okay.
And by doing so, they wanted to introduce a lot of the technology that we use. Nowadays, everybody has or is on their smartphone, if they have one, or they're on their computer, or they're on their laptop. We have all these forms of technology that we're always locked into, if you will. And so they wanted to introduce us having the option of doing it online. And so that for the first time ever, you had the option of completing your 2020 census online by going to either my2020census.gov or 2020census.gov.
Okay. So now you said the census is a count of every individual in America. So why do we need to count every individual in the United States?
We count every individual in the United States for the purposes of federal funding and for representation.
Okay.
So the federal government issues out more than $675 billion
Okay.
every 10 years. And in order to divvy out those funds, you need to know what programs are needing that funding and
Mm-hmm.
what, each state will get a certain amount of funding. And when they get that certain amount of funding, state and local federal officials will know how to divvy that money out to each program. And also we take the census because we need to have a representation in the House. So we need to have a voice, someone that represents our state and our government when it is time to make decisions.
Okay. So one aspect of it is funding, and then the other aspect of it is
Representation.
representation in terms of voting. So, how does the census actually impact a particular community?
So let me just give an example
Okay.
if you allow me to. So for individuals it affects all communities as a
Okay.
whole. You have your smaller particular communities. So
Hmm.
let's just look at it from a broad standpoint. For our public highways and our transportation use, you have to have funding to fix those roads for
Yes.
us to have safe conditions to travel on to and from work, to and from the doctor, or wherever you may be traveling. And in order for you to have, like, when there's damage to the roads, you need
Hmm.
to have funding to fix those roads.
Okay.
And so though that federal funding that is given helps to fix those roads that we have.
Okay.
So it
So
affects us all.
so let me see if I can tease it out a different way.
Mhm.
So you have two communities, okay? Um, one community has, and I'm just throwing out very broad numbers. One community has a population of 10,000 people. The other community has a population of 100,000 people. Now, obviously, with the population of 100,000 people, the roads that they're using more of the road. More
Mhm.
people are using the road. And
Mhm.
so if the road conditions get bad, it's now affecting 100,000 people. And
Exactly.
so the idea is, let's give more money to that community with 100,000 people because to fix the roads, because we know they're going to be damaged more quickly and it's going to affect more people if the roads are bad, as opposed to the 10,000 person community. Well, not as many people are going to use the road. It may take longer to deteriorate, and so we don't
Well,
need to give that amount of it. Is that
not so much that. So give it to you at a different standpoint.
okay?
So let's look at it for our Head Start programs, if you will.
Okay.
So back in 2010, there were over 1 million children under the age of 5 years old that didn't
Mm-hmm.
count.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get count at all. So for every individual that is not counted, you lose money for those programs because
Okay.
you don't have an accounting of those kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and what you did 10 years ago affects you up until now. So whatever count that they had in 2010 affected us for 10 years.
Okay.
So if we had 5,000 children
Mm-hmm.
in this area living in this small community of Denmark, if you will,
Okay.
we had 5,000 children in this area, and only 1,000 of those children were counted, but we need room to put a Head Start program in this area. We don't have the funding to do so because
Okay.
5,000 children were not accounted for.
Okay.
So we only have enough money for, and of course, it's not all the money comes from the federal government. Don't get me
Mm-hmm.
wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But a percentage of funding that is provided out of that $675 billion goes to programs like Head Start. It goes to programs like public transportation and highway
Mm-hmm.
fixing, and it goes to Medicare.
Okay.
And so when you don't have an accurate count of individuals, you don't have an accurate count of funding for those programs
Okay.
because the money follows the people.
Okay. So how has this historically, or at least, in maybe somewhat recently, how has this affected the African American community and the Latino community in terms of whether it's underreporting and the effect of that on distribution of funds and representation?
So when it comes to African American and Latino communities, those are the communities that are deemed hardest to count.
Okay.
So that's how they are categorized. They are hard to count areas. And the reason being is because there's a distrust in the
Hmm.
government from those minorities.
Okay.
So, for one, they don't want intrusion into their personal business.
Hmm.
And so they don't participate, they don't
Okay.
complete their census. Um, that is kind of something that we see among the African American population. And when it comes to the Latino or Hispanic population,
Hmm.
we also see a lot of distrust for fear of deportation. If I'm not supposed to be here, then
Okay.
they can use my
Undocumented immigrants. Okay.
uh-huh, they can use my information against me and give my information to ICE, and then I'm deported.
Okay.
What we like to do is dispel that those notions that we're going to use your information against you. And it
Okay.
all comes from educating individuals. So all census data is confidential. Your information is not shared with the FBI, it's not shared with ICE, it's not shared with the CIA for any other purposes or for any reason at all. It is only for a population count. Your information is not made public, it cannot be shared, and there are penalties for anyone working with the census that does share your information. They're penalized, they could get jail time, and so that information is not shared, and a lot of it comes to the fact of being educated on what it is used, what your data is used for.
Hmm.
They're not asking you any personal information as far as your social security number. They're not asking you information about your bank accounts and how much
Hmm.
money you already have. They're not asking you what political um, or
Your
what
affiliation. Uh-huh.
station you're associated with. They don't ask you those types of questions. It's just basic, simple questions, names of individuals who live in your household, their
Hmm.
date of birth, so we can
Hmm.
know how old they are. You have the option of filling out your ethnicity and your race. So you could be African American, but you want to be categorized as Haitian, Nigerian. So they give you that option as well. Just basic, simple information.
Okay. 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 So,
So not a whole lot of intrusion like most people think. It's not intrusion into your personal life. It's just that we need an accounting of individuals so we know what where individuals are
hmm
and the proper amount of representation that is needed in a particular area. Because what happens is when you start losing people in a certain area, then your districts are redrawn.
okay. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, so if you only have if you have 5 districts, and I don't want to get too deep into it. So but that's how they determine how many representatives are needed in an area.
Okay.
That when the president receives the count, which he does December 31st, 2020, is when the actual whole count needs to be turned into him,
Hmm.
and then that information is made public the following year.
Okay.
Then you need to know how many particular people are in a specific area, so you'll know how many representatives are needed in your state, in your city, or in your county, if you will.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. So again, you're saying that it's important to have an accurate count because you could be underrepresented, whether
Exactly.
on a county level, on a state
City
level,
level, right?
national
Exactly.
level.
And that plays a big pivotal role. It plays a vital role in ensuring that we have an accurate count, because even if you feel like I'm not supposed to be here,
Hmm.
I'm an undocumented citizen in the United States. If you're enjoying in the resources that are provided
Hmm.
to you through federal funding, then you need to be counted so that they can have an accurate amount of funding that needs to go to that particular program.
Okay.
So even if you're not supposed to be here, you still need to be counted. Even for like students that are not originally from Alabama, but they may
Hmm.
be going to one of the colleges here.
Okay.
And before COVID occurred, of course,
Hmm.
we had students living on campus. Say, for instance, that Alabama A&M.
Yes.
A lot of those students might have been from Chicago, New York, Tennessee, wherever they were from, but they were living on campus at Alabama A&M University, and they
Hmm.
were living in the dormitories. So their RA would have counted them where they were on April 1st. And on
Okay.
April 1st, they would have been in Huntsville, Alabama, so they would have been accounted for in Alabama, opposed to being counted in their where they're originally from.
Okay. Because, and I'm assuming now, because the reality is, let's say they're a freshman or even a sophomore. They have 3 or 4 more years in Alabama, taking advantage of the services here in Alabama. And
Exactly.
and so if they are underrepresented, then um, there would be limitations on the ability to provide services, because I think I'm only providing services for 5 million people, or 2 million people, but really
Exactly.
it's 2,500, and so that
Right.
or 2.5 million, so that 500,000 I've got to now scramble to
Hmm.
provide services for them because I didn't anticipate that, because I didn't know that they existed here.
Right. And when it comes to educational institutions and universities, some of the schools that are mostly impacted by
Hmm.
census data are your HBCUs, your historically black colleges and universities, because when you have students who need that funding for Pell Grants,
Hmm.
that funding comes from the federal government relies on census data
Hmm.
to determine how much funding to give for the Pell Grants and the student Stafford loan, or the food and nutrition programs, or
Yes.
what have you. They rely on that data. So having an accurate account of people would let them determine how much money do I need to divvy out to this program.
So what I hear you saying is that, especially for the African American and the Latino community, we really are working against ourselves when we don't fill out the
Right.
census.
Right. Because it's not about, they're not going to share, this federal organization is not going to share your information with another federal organization. So they're
Hmm.
not going to take your information and share it with the housing urban development
Hmm. Hmm.
to say, well, she filled out her census and it shows that she has someone living with her who is not on their lease. That information is not shared with another institution. It is
Okay.
mainly, it's for an account of how many people are in your household. If 7 people live in your household and it's a friend, a aunt, a grandmother, whomever it may be, regardless if you have filled out for, say, for instance, SNAP benefits,
Hmm.
and you didn't include all 7 people on there, or you live in Section 8 housing
Hmm.
and you didn't tell that on your application, it doesn't matter. We're not being intrusive in your business to say, okay, we're going to report this information to them. No, our information is just for the count of individuals that are living in your household when the census is taken. We're not trying to share your information in any other way other than for an accurate count of individuals.
So let's say, for instance, I'm living in a household, I'm in a house, and let's say, my wife, myself, my two kids, but then my cousin is also living, my cousin and his wife and his two kids. So there's technically two families, but we're living in the same house.
Mhm.
How how do we go about reporting in terms of the census within that type of scenario?
So if y'all are not separated and y'all are all under one residence having one address, you being the head of household would fill out the census and you would count all 6 people,
Mhm.
yourself, your wife, your child, and then your friends
Yeah, yeah,
with
my brother's family
right,
as well.
yeah, your brother, his family, and their child. You would count all those individuals in your household, especially if they're in your household and they are living there. It's
Okay.
where you live and eat most of the time. So say for instance you have a unique situation where you and your wife were divorced and
Hmm.
y'all share custody of your
Hmm.
son,
Okay.
and he's over your wife's house Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but at your house Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Hmm.
Wherever your child is at majority of the time, then that's where the child would be counted in that particular household. So that the child won't be counted twice. Counted in your household and their household. You count what the child is at 50% of the time. Okay, well then what if my son is at my house 4 days a week and 3 days a week at her house? That's almost about, or 3.5 days at my house and three and a
Hmm.
half days. So that's equal amount of time that we share with our child.
Yes.
Wherever your child was at on April 1st is where you want to count your child.
So so in that type of scenario, my wife and I are divorced, and let's say, for instance, I'm living here in Alabama, but my wife is living in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my child spends half of time in Alabama, half the time in Tennessee. Um, so that's going to impact the funding and representation for Alabama and for Tennessee. But you're
Well,
saying,
so in a unique situation like that, if they're of school age, they would have to probably more than likely stay in one household Monday through Friday in order to go to school.
okay,
Because no school is going to let you divide time between two schools,
hmm,
two institutions. So that's kind of a unique situation. But what if the child is under 5 years old and they've not yet enrolled in school?
okay,
And you have that unique situation where you're
hmm,
in Alabama and your wife's is in Tennessee. Wherever that child was at on April 1st,
okay,
then that's where you would count that child. And the same thing applies for, like, we have so many different types of unique situations where we have homeless individuals who don't have a
yes,
household at all.
okay,
So we have operations that were set up prior to COVID where individuals would have feet on ground and they will go count those homeless individuals wherever they are.
hmm,
And so, like in 2010, I think they had an operation called Operation Enumeration, or some type of operation where they went out to wherever the homeless individuals were. And it was a lot easier for North Alabama because in places like Huntsville, Alabama, they had Tent City 10 years ago.
yes,
So it's easy for trained census workers, not myself or not someone like me, but they were trained specifically for that job to go
okay,
out in the middle of the night and actually disturb the homeless, or if go
hmm,
and meet
hmm,
with them
hmm,
and ensure that they counted those individuals.
okay, okay,
So they do have situations where you will run into unique situations. We try to educate you on every level of the census so that everyone is clear, because when there are questions about where do I need to count my student who is in college, where
hmm,
do I need to count my uncle who is staying with me for the rest of the year, or
hmm,
where do I need to count my grandmother who's in the nursing home.
okay,
Nursing home has taken care. So most times there is a specified person that will count every individual that is in a nursing home. Or
Okay.
what about unique situations like assisted living facilities where they get their mail directly to them? Each
Hmm.
individual has their own space and has their
Yes.
own apartment or whatever. They would have sent that information to each individual household, but like in a nursing home, there's no individual mailbox.
Correct.
It's just everybody in one big home in individual rooms. And so the
Yes.
director or the facilitator who has been designated to take the census count will count all individuals in that facility at once.
Okay.
Same thing with prisons and jails.
Hmm.
You know, the warden and the chief, they'll count all the prisoners who are in their jail cells. They will count them in those individuals
Hmm.
there. Same thing for like dormitories, like I just explained, the RA would have counted everyone who was in her dorm, so
Yes.
on and so forth.
Okay. So now you mentioned a difference between pre-COVID and now, as in terms of, as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the COVID crisis. So before COVID occurred, you were saying that not only did people receive something in the mail, but there would be individuals who would physically go door to door.
No, so initially when COVID, prior to COVID,
Hmm.
individuals received a invitation to complete their census in the mail.
Okay.
And so when they received that invitation, they had a unique code that they
Hmm.
would use to go respond online.
Okay.
And with that unique code, you would go online, 2020census.gov, and you would see the button that says respond now, and then you respond for every person in your household.
Hmm.
Some households did not automatically receive that invitation um, because they may live in, like, excuse me,
Hmm.
they may live in rural areas, or they may have like PO boxes and they don't have access to mailing like the typical average person.
Okay.
So census takers would have went to those areas
Hmm.
and dropped off a
Okay.
census form. So that was about 5% of the areas would a census taker would actually deliver a census form to you. But due to COVID, of course, those operations were pushed back.
Okay.
And so that's why it was important to us prior to April 1st to really get feet on the ground, speak to elected officials in the areas, speak to community organizations and community leaders to educate them on the importance of the census and the
Hmm.
census, bringing awareness that the census was on its way, our churches, and so that by the time that April 1st got here, everybody would know how to respond. And the big encouragement was to go respond online.
Okay.
But they did not have to necessarily go online. They could also call the census number and speak to a live person.
Hmm.
And so we provided every individual that we could with that information. The number was 844 and still is, because you still can respond. We want you to act now. If you have not, you can call 844 330 2020.
Okay.
844 330 2020 to
Okay.
respond. So
Okay.
that was another option. And then
Hmm.
again, some households did receive the questionnaire. So, and you had an envelope that came to you. It had prepaid postage. So all
Hmm.
you had to do was complete it and send it back.
Okay.
So those
So,
were the three ways. And the
okay.
newest way, of course, was the new technology base of responding online. So that's how we were encouraging individuals to respond online.
Okay. So let's play devil's advocate, or let's a hypothetical scenario. Um, I was negligent and I have not filled out the census.
Uh-huh.
Something may have been mailed to me, but I have no idea where it is, or I may even have thrown it out. Is it first of all, is it too late for me to fill out the census?
No, due to COVID, a lot of our operations were pushed back, and initially, the deadline to respond online or by phone to self-respond is what it's called, would have been August 14th, but that date has now changed to October the 31st.
Okay.
Individuals still can self-respond up until October 31st. And then I remember you mentioning um, something about census takers actually coming to your home.
Okay.
So the difference is that originally census
Hmm.
takers would have been just dropping off the census form to those individuals that lived in those rural areas where they don't have access to internet and Wi-Fi and
Yes.
so on and so forth, or they had PO boxes. And that's
Okay.
only a small percentage of individuals that would have fell into that category. But then you have individuals who will not respond. And so after self-response is over, then we would have started an operation called enumeration, where
Hmm.
census takers knock on your door asking you to complete your census.
Okay.
So that is not something that happens in the beginning. That happens when you do not respond and the deadline for self-response has ended.
So, um, I'm again scenario. I'm negligent. You said the I can still fill it up, self respond by October the
31st.
31st. Okay, and then after that, if I have not responded, then I mean technically, yeah, within COVID, somebody will come knocking on my door. Now, but how would they know that I have not responded?
Because there is excuse me,
That's okay.
because of that unique code, and because you have responded, we know who has already sent in their information
Based on the address.
based on the address.
So, okay, so let's say there was a invitation to fill out the census that was sent to me. I don't know where it is. I lost it. I threw it out. I was like,
So
I
you
don't.
don't have to have that unique code because it's
Okay,
based on your address,
okay, okay,
physical location. Yes. So you
okay,
don't have to have that code to go online to self-respond. So if you
okay.
don't have that unique code, it'll ask you, do you have the code? If you don't, you can proceed and move forward because at the end of the day, it's about that address.
Address. Okay.
Right. That's why when we talk about counting people right where they are,
Mm-hmm.
it's about where they are,
Yes. Okay. Okay.
opposed to who you. I mean, it is about who you are, but you know, the physical address is what is detected in the system.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know how many people this really would affect, but let's say, for instance, April the 1st, it's in the middle of the school year. So if you do have, and especially say Huntsville, because we do have a number of colleges, and universities here, a number of dorming situations. We have at least, two HBCUs um, that, have a dorming situation. So you would have counted those individuals April the 1st. But now with COVID-19 and students having to go back to their places, um, there could be a possibility of underreporting because people
Well,
are
if
no longer there.
myself as a partnership specialist, if I've done my job effectively,
Okay.
then I would then reach out to my partners,
Mm-hmm.
and your partners are individuals that you have made some form of contact with, your community leaders, your community organizations, your elected officials. Those are your partners. Those are your trusted voices in the community. So
Mm-hmm.
that is who you rely on for situations like this, to
Okay.
go back and follow up with those individuals. So
Okay.
what we had the pleasure, the opportunity of doing is going back to speak with like Oakwood University and Alabama A&M University, and whoever our contact was, to ask them, okay, were the students counted for on your
Mm-hmm.
campus?
Mm-hmm.
And we did a follow-up, and they were.
Okay.
So if the work was done effectively prior to COVID, then the same work that would have taken place on April 1st it still took place even after the pandemic.
Okay. Okay. So, um, I know, again, before COVID-19, there were opportunities for individuals to work or even volunteer or get paid as census takers. Um, how has COVID-19 affected that? If somebody wanted to get involved, if somebody wanted to either get some volunteer hours or get a little, stipend or whatever to be able to do that. Are there still those kinds of opportunities to work with the census?
There is. We are still encouraging individuals to apply because, of course, we're going to have some hesitancy among others that were hired to work for the census. Some people will be leery now to get back out in the public
Mm-hmm.
because nobody wants to be sick and ill. And so you do have a lot of hesitancy and leeriness with the pandemic going on. So we are encouraging individuals to still apply,
Mm-hmm.
and they can still apply for those jobs that were available because we expect that the operations will continue. They just were kind of delayed, if
Okay.
you so for us, we had a time period where we were grounded and we could not go out into community. We couldn't go out and speak with our partners and have any contact with individuals. And we're slowly starting to get back out in the field. And so some of our operations are slowly starting to pick back up and
Okay.
beginning.
So as we're coming to a close with this, um, the my audience spans individuals in Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, and the panhandles of Florida. So, are there any specific dates or information pertinent to those particular areas, or because this is a federal uh, government thing, then all dates are pretty
So
uniform.
all dates are not going to be the same for
Oh,
those
okay.
states that you've mentioned because although Alabama may have given approval for individuals to start going back in the field, Kentucky may not have. Now, our region consists of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida. Those
Hmm.
7 states is what the Atlanta region it consists of. And although Alabama may be slowly moving back out into operations, individuals who are living in Georgia may not. So
Okay.
it's different. It's different for it's unique for every state.
But the deadline for submitting your census is
Will be the
uniform,
same for everyone.
October the 31st.
October the 31st.
Okay. Okay. Um,
I'll also send you a timeline with updated information on those operations.
okay. Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Kimberly, for informing us about what the census is and also letting us know the importance of filling out the census, especially for communities of color.
Yeah.
As you're saying, it's not a case of they're trying to track you down to, punish you in any way, but that we are encouraged to fill out the census so that we can be counted, so that we can receive the funding that we need for our community, as well as we can be represented um,
Yes.
with the
Those are
community.
yes, that is why we complete our census. That is
Okay.
the only reasons why we
Okay.
complete our census. We don't complete our census so that someone can come knock on your door and take you away. We
Hmm.
complete our census because we need state and local and federal officials to know how much money we need
Hmm.
and so that we have our proper representation.
So again, how can I get a census? Where do I go? What's the website? What's the telephone number?
So if you have your census form that was mailed to you and you still know where it is, I encourage you to go ahead and complete it and mail it back. And if you do not, I encourage you to self-respond online at my2020census.gov
Hmm.
or by phone at 844-330-2020.
Okay. So that's my2020census.gov, and then that's 844 area code 330-2020.
Yes.
And get this done by October the 31st.
Now.
Oh, sorry.
Get it done now.
Now.
Get it down now, because we can actually see what our communities are looking like and what areas are responding. So
Okay.
if you go on to 2020census.gov, you can kind of scroll up the screen and you can click on 2020 response rates. You'll see it highlighted in blue.
Mm-hmm.
And it has every state in the
Yeah.
United States on there. And then you can choose either to look at a county level, a city level, or by tract level.
Mm-hmm.
And so, say for instance, if you wanted to look at a particular area in your community, you could see kind of how your neighborhood or your community is looking and say, okay, I live over here and I live on this particular street and in this particular community,
Mm-hmm.
and I live in Census Tract 7, and we only have about 20% of individuals who have self-responded. Let me get out and make some type of public notice. Let me go door to door. Let me get in my car and blow my horn as a trusted voice of my community,
Mm-hmm.
and get on a bullhorn and say, hey, complete your census if you have not,
Okay.
that type of thing. So you can see what your county, your city, your census tract looks like, if you have or your community has not responded. And it makes a difference, because when you see other communities, your neighboring communities or your neighboring counties, and they have about 70% of individuals who've already responded,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're living in this county where only 40% of individuals are responding, then it kind of lights a fire under you, and you're like, okay, there's more work to be done here. There's more educating that we need to be doing here, because it's something about this area that they're not wanting to respond. So let me use my voice. Let me educate them on the why and the how, and the important aspects of it. And once you do that, then you have a better participation rate. You have an increase in participation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the things that we do as partnership specialists. We kind of continue to encourage our community leaders, our church organizations, our elected officials to tell their communities, because that is who you have representing you.
Yes.
And so if they can't educate you on the things that you need to be educated on, then that's the kind of type of things that you want to take notice of.
Yes. Yeah. So if people needed more information as to how they can get involved in, and especially if you're over the region, and I know that you're saying that not every state that I mentioned you're covered by. I know you do Alabama.
I do Alabama, but I can put you into contact with someone from every one of those states that you mentioned.
Okay. So if people wanted to find out more information, is there a number or something that they can get in touch with you, or you would prefer they get in touch with me and then I can pass them?
Anyone can contact me with questions and concerns
Okay.
at kimberly.y.williams@2020census.gov.
Okay. And
Or
I'll make that.
Or you can reach me by phone at 678-733-2831.
Okay.
And I'll be happy to assist you in any way that I can.
And I'll make those numbers and websites, etc., available at the end of the podcast, so that people can have it and then be able to move accordingly. So they can fill out their census now.
Now, not tomorrow. Oh, I have time to do it on the weekend, because it only takes about 6 to 10 minutes to complete it. It just depends upon how well you use, how well you are.
Okay.
How computer tech savvy you are.
Yes. Yeah.
So, It
Okay.
only takes about 6 minutes to respond. So act now, be counted. Let your voice be heard. If there was ever a time that you wanted your voice to be heard, this is the time right now.
Okay. Kimberly Williams, thank you so much for taking out the time to join me here in the public square to inform us about the importance of the census. And we certainly appreciate it. We appreciate the work that you're doing. We appreciate the importance of the work that you're doing for us, in this southern region, but also on a national level. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to speak and educate you all on the importance of participation. Again, I encourage you all, if you have not, to go ahead and act now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching The Public Square. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email me at pgoodridge@scc-sda.org. So, until next time, let's be good to each other, let's keep the conversation going, and I'll meet you again in the public square.